Today, the topic that we'll be discussing is going to be what to do with that inner critic. So, all those who are recovering from trauma have something inside them called like an inner critic. It's like an inner voice, and that voice can be quite negative. And so, for that, we can look at the story of Dara. Dara was very excited. In fact, this particular night was a very important night for her. In her young life, it was one of the most important nights because it was her prom night. And Dara was all dressed up. She had a really nice dress that she had bought the weekend before. She had saved up her money, and her mom even helped her buy the dress. She had spent hours that day on her hair and her makeup so that she would just look her absolute best. And now it was all put together. She's standing there in her dress and her full makeup and her hair and her heels, and she decided to step outside of her house so she could take in the fresh air while she waited for her date to arrive. And as she's standing there waiting, her sister comes outside of the house and walks up behind her. And this is what her sister says to her. Her sister says, "I know mom and dad said you look really good, but I just want to tell you the truth. You've always been ugly and you look ugly right now. That dress is not helping you whatsoever. In fact, you look like a prostitute standing outside here. I'd also like to inform you that your makeup looks super fake and caked on. Your eyelashes are way too big and apparently fake, and your hair does not look like you spent the amount of time that you spent on it. All in all, you're an embarrassment. I would also like to inform you," her sister says to her, "that your date is late right now because your date doesn't care about you. Your date is obviously still into his ex-girlfriend, and once he picks you up, you're not going to be on his mind at all. So whatever fake time that you guys have together tonight, I hope you enjoy it because you have completely wasted your time and your money on this ridiculous experience." And with that, the sister walks in the house, her date pulls up, and Dara just felt totally, she had like a feeling that welled up inside of her chest, and she got sick to her stomach, and she felt like she couldn't even look her date in the eye when he pulled up. She felt totally insecure, unhappy, and she just couldn't wait for the night to be over at that point. Now, how do you feel about what the sister said to Dara? Do you feel like that sister really had Dara's best interests at heart? Because the sister was saying that she was actually telling the truth. Do you feel like that sister was really looking out for Dara? Do you think that sister really showed Dara love or compassion? The story I just told you is a true story, but I changed one essential element. The element that I changed is that the person who said all of those things to Dara wasn't her sister. Those were all the things that Dara said to herself in her head. Now, how many of us here have an inner critic that sounds something like that? You see, when you believe that it was another person who was saying all of those things to Dara, you may have felt incensed. You may have felt defensive of Dara. You may have felt that no one should talk to anyone that way, not even their sister. And you may have felt that it was indeed not helpful. It was not healthy. But now that you realize that Dara is actually speaking to herself, how do you feel? And now when you recognize that this is happening around the world every single day with millions of trauma survivors who are speaking to themselves this way, how do you feel? And now when you think of yourself and you having that voice that speaks to you that way, how do you feel? The reality of the inner critic is that although it purports to be there for you and to have your back, The inner critic is not actually working in your best interests. One of the best descriptions of an inner critic is that it's anti-self. So it's actually working against you. It's not helping you. We tend to have a double standard when it comes to ourselves. We believe other people should be treated kindly, but not necessarily ourselves. We feel like other people should be forgiven when they make mistakes, but when we make a mistake, we're beating ourselves on the back over the mistake that we made. We set low standards for other people, but then for ourselves, we set really high standards. Does that sound familiar? What is your inner voice telling you? Do you have an inner critic that says things like, you're ugly, you're not attractive? Oh, this new job that you got, you're not even going to be able to do this job. You can't do this job. You're not that smart. You're dumb. You're so stupid. Oh, this relationship you're in, they don't really care about you. Oh, don't open yourself up and trust them because you'll just get hurt. When you have an inner critic like that, when you have a voice inside of you that's speaking to you so harshly, it affects the way you feel. And it's going to pull you into anxiety or into depression. But why do we have a critic like that? The inner critic is actually developed in childhood. Our parents, because they were harsh in the way they spoke to us, formed the inner critic. Or because they abandoned us when we were young, we formed an inner criticizing voice that we felt reflected the way our parents truly felt. Or because they were neglectful of us and our needs, we formed an inner critic that we felt would reflect our parents' viewpoint of us. And we formed this in our childhood because we have a perception as children that our parents must be right. And so if our parents are saying that we're wrong, or there's something wrong with us, or that we're inadequate, then we assume that that is the truth. And so we adopt a false belief that our parents were right and we are wrong. So if we were neglected, that was the right thing to do because we deserve to be neglected. We internalize their abuse. If they abuse us, it was because we were bad. We deserved to be abused. If they said harsh things to us, we internalize their voice so that the things you're saying to yourself, that inner critic or inner voice, is actually the voice of your mother or your father or your grandmother or whomever it was that was giving you care. It could be just something a kid said to you in school. It could have been a bully. Could have been something someone wrote to you online. But these are not your voices. Your inner voice, your inner critic was actually formed by people who did not care for you properly. And so there's a chief irony in this because you're actually looking for advice from people who don't care for you. And you've allowed their negativity to actually form the way that you deal with and care for yourself. Because after all, if mom and dad didn't care for me, then why would I care for myself? It's quite sad, isn't it? So what kind of inner voice do you have? There's a lot of ways that we can maladapt into having a negative inner critic. You could be the type to have the perfectionist inner voice. The perfectionist inner voice is the one that tells you it's never good enough and you're never good enough. And guess what? You're never gonna be good enough. It's always pushing toward perfection. The kitchen isn't clean enough. The project isn't good enough. You didn't do good enough. If you aced a meeting, you aced a speech, you aced a project, you're still telling yourself it wasn't good enough and you should have did better. Or you could have the inner voice that's the impulse shamer. The impulse shamer is like this inner nun or this inner monk inside of you that tears you down over your own thoughts. The fact that you even had a bad impulse, it says, you are just a terrible person. How dare you think about that negative thing? How dare you have an improper sexual impulse? How dare you have a violent thought? How dare, you are really an awful person to think about hurting yourself. And whatever negative thought that might pop into your head, you shame yourself. just for having a thought, just for the very fact that you had an impulse or you had a desire or craving for something that wasn't totally good, totally wholesome. So you tear yourself down over it and make yourself feel worse. Or you have the taskmaster inner voice. The taskmaster is like cracking the whip on you constantly. Let's go. What are you doing? You're not working hard enough. Let's go. We got to get going. We got to do the next thing and the next thing. And you're always pushing yourself to work. There's never enough work. You got to work harder. Or you might have the underminer. No matter what it is you might think you want to do, the underminer is always like, you're not going to do that. Oh, you can't do that. Are you kidding me? You don't have any skill in that. You don't have any talent in that. Oh, you don't have any ability. You're not special. Who do you think you are? It's constantly undermining. It's undermining your looks. It's undermining your confidence. It undermines your intelligence. Oh, you're not that smart. Oh, you're so dumb. Oh my goodness. How could you think you could do that? It's always saying you don't do it, and it's always saying you can't do it. I don't think you should take that risk. I don't think you should take that loan. I don't think you should open that business. I don't think you should go there or go there or go to the party. It's constantly undermining you. Or you might have the destroyer voice, the really strong voice that actually obliterates your self-worth. It's just like, you are worthless. Why are you even alive? I just want to kill myself. You shouldn't exist at all. You're a total waste. Does this sound familiar? Or do you have the punisher that's constantly judging you and punishing you and creating false guilt over every situation? Oh my goodness, I walked across the street and I didn't wait to make sure everyone walked ahead of me. Oh my gosh, I ate this food, but I threw away my crust from my bread. I'm constantly beating myself down and feeling guilty about every little thing. Always, oh man, I know I probably did something wrong. I'm probably a burden. I'm such a burden. I'm such a waste. Guilt, constant guilt. And the thing is, whatever you've done in your life, you feel guilty for it. Whatever you've done wrong, you give yourself basically a life sentence of guilt over it. You never allow yourself to feel forgiven, like you can move on. Or you might have the conformist self that's like, oh, those shoes aren't going to, no, you got to get better pants than that. Oh no, we got to, come on, we got to act a little bit more cool. We got to be more like the popular people. No, don't, you can't go out like that. You got to be more like this. It's constantly trying to get you into a box so that you can conform, because it thinks that you'll be safe as long as you don't stand out. But when you try not to stand out in the world, you can become invisible. The reason we hold on to these inner voices, one, we might not have realized that these voices actually just come from our childhood and that they are not helpful. It's a false belief. We may carry the false belief that these voices are helping us, because we're like, yeah, that helps me to work harder, because I got to be hard on myself, and that's what you don't understand. Like for me, I got to really like push myself. So I tell myself, you moron, you idiot, get to work. You're so worthless. And that works. That makes me feel like I can get some stuff done. But is that really true? Is that really effective for motivating you? Because that's a big reason why we feel like we should be hard on ourselves, is that we're motivating ourselves and we're just trying to be our best selves, right? We feel like we should feel guilty when we do something wrong, right? Because we think it's making us a better person. But the reality is that's a slight misconception. There is some benefit in being hard on yourself sometimes, but research has shown It's a short-term benefit. So when you're in a specific situation, just in that moment, it can be good to push yourself a little bit and say, come on, man, let's go. You can do this. Let's go. And just push yourself to work a little bit harder. For instance, let's say you're in the gym and you're pulling that last curl. Oh, you got this. Like, come on, like push yourself to work harder. It's going to have more benefits in that moment, right? So that's not a moment to be like, oh no, don't worry, you don't have to work hard. There are moments where we got to work hard, right? So we do have to have the ability to push ourselves. But what's happened here with the inner voice, we've taken it to a whole nother level. We're in the stratosphere out there with pushing ourselves. Like that's too much. You're not supposed to be walking around every moment of the day. In fact, the amount of time that you have to be hard on yourself is by far the minority. And that's what nobody told you. You see, you never got the memo that you're only supposed to rarely push yourself like that. Like when you're on that last rep, then you push yourself, but it's done. After that, you have to go into self-compassion. Self-compassion is caring for yourself, showing yourself care, love, comfort, the way a parent is supposed to treat a child. And so when you put that weight down, you're supposed to say, good job, Roman. You did a really good job. Take a break. Get some water. Relax. It's important that we practice self-compassion, but in order to practice self-compassion, we have to understand what compassion is. So the best way I can help trauma survivors to recognize compassion is to recognize the compassion they already have. The compassion you already have is the compassion you have for everyone else. You see, if you look at the way that you treat other people, all of the love you put into them, how kind you are to them, how forgiving you are to them, how low you set your expectations of them, you're supposed to be bringing that in for yourself as well. You're supposed to be the recipient of it. You're the type of person who basically goes out of your way to cook an elaborate meal, and then you serve everyone else, but you don't sit down and eat. You need to be eating the meal too. It's fine if you want to cook an elaborate meal. If you're a very loving person, a very compassionate person, that's fine. But you need to be eating the meal too. Okay? So you have to learn to speak to yourself with a voice of compassion, with a voice of reasonableness. You have to speak to yourself very cool, and you have to actually combat these negative, critical, harsh voices that you're dealing with. So how's that going to look? Well, basically, going forward, when you hear one of those negative, harsh, critical voices coming up that might be from your past or from your thought that being harsh to yourself is going to be of a benefit to yourself, I want you to recognize that voice and I want you to analyze it. So as it comes up, I want you to ask yourself, wait a second, man, is that really helpful? All right, so you're walking down the street and then somebody walks by that's really beautiful, and then you think to yourself, oh my God, I look ugly. And I want you to stop. I want you to ask yourself, wait a second, is that really helpful? Is it helpful for me to convince myself that I look ugly? And then as you play out the script in your head, you can see yourself moving through the day with the belief that you look ugly, and as a result, having a less successful day. And in recognizing it, you realize it's not helpful to tear myself down. So you combat it and you say, you know what? I'm not ugly. I have my own unique look, or today's maybe not my best day, but I'm a beautiful person. You have to have the compassionate voice so that you can reparent the self, and you need to lay that right over top of that old negative, critical voice. You can only handle a little bit of self-criticism. maybe about 15% self-criticism. 85 to 90% of your thoughts need to be neutral to positive thinking. You cannot handle 50% of your thoughts being critical. It will lead you to depression and anxiety, poor mental health, and it will affect you negatively in every area of your life. Point being, it is not helpful. So the first thing you need to do is judge the judge by asking, is this really helpful? Is this not really helping me to get to my goal? Thinking that I'm dumb, feeling guilty over what happened, replaying it over and over again, tearing myself down. Is it really helping me? Criticize the critic, judge the judge. You want to identify the voice. Where does this voice really come from? Aren't I really repeating something a bully said to me? Now, does that make sense? Would I carry that person around with me for the rest of my life? Do I really want to have my mom's negative voice in my head for the rest of my life? Recognize where the voice comes from. Oh, that's my dad. That's dad talking. And then use the JOT method. So what you want to do is you want to write it down. The JOT method, JOT, journaling organizes thoughts. So let's do that right now. Pull out your pen or pencil and let's do the exercise together. So I want you to take one example of a critical thing that you might have said to yourself recently, okay? And you're gonna split your page by drawing a line right down the middle, and on the left side, just kind of write in shorthand what it was that you said to yourself, that negative thought. And then what you're gonna do on the right-hand side is you're gonna combat that negative thought with a more compassionate, more balanced thought. The negative thought comes from your emotional mind, your subconscious mind. So in order to think of your more compassionate thought, I want you to go into your superior, cerebral, logical, wise, compassionate mind. That's the parent self, the mother or the father within you. And I want you to reparent that thought. So go ahead, I'm going to give you a moment. You jot down the negative inner critic thing that you said to yourself. And I want you to combat that on the right-hand side of the page. Take a moment. Okay, awesome. So now you have an example here of what should be happening in your head every day. As you're going through this recovery process, what you have to be doing on a daily basis, no matter how many times these negative thoughts come up, every single time you have to examine them, you have to judge them. Is that really helpful? What's a more helpful way? And then you give yourself the more helpful thought. This is what healthy people are doing every day. You see, because all of us will occasionally get critical thoughts, but we're combating those critical thoughts and we're balancing them back out. Because when you balance your thoughts, you balance your emotions. And a balanced chemical self, a balanced emotional self is a healthy self. So do we have a volunteer who can share with us what that negative thought was and how they combated it with a more compassionate, balanced thought? Miranda, thank you. We got a brave volunteer.
Okay, I wrote this one comes up the most for me, that I'm not smart enough. So my combative is I am smart in what I know and I'm learning new things every day. If I make a mistake or fail, I can learn from it and try it again.
Awesome. That's what I'm talking about right there. That's what I'm talking about right there. And that's what you got to say to yourself when it comes up. You have to do the exact same thing. So when you have that moment that says, oh man, I'm not smart, right then and there, you got to be like, now, was that helpful? No. And then go through your script. Look, I'm smart in what I know. I know what I know. I'm learning every day. I have the capacity to be very intelligent. Very good. That was excellent. That was perfect, Miranda. Any other brave volunteers to stand before us and lead us in our quest to recover? None as brave as Miranda. Someone in the audience has the bravery to step up.
Guys, I was sweating over here.
What they don't know, Miranda, is I was actually going to give $1,000 to every person who stepped up. Go ahead, Gabrielle. I'm joking.
Okay, hi everyone. Well, the thing is that I struggle a lot to leave my house, so I find myself like constantly struggling to leave, even if it's to walk around the block. So the other day when it started getting nice, I decided to take my dog out and take my kids out for a walk. And as I was going around my neighborhood, I keep thinking to myself, I was like, man, the neighbors are probably going to say to themselves, oh my gosh, she's probably on some stronger meds. She's finally out of the house, because they have made remarks like, Gabby, you should enjoy the day or this and that. And I was just thinking to myself, man, they're probably thinking, um, I changed medications, or I'm probably, drugged up and that's why I'm out. And then, for I don't know why. It was just a walk around the block, But in my mind, I kept thinking to myself, they're probably looking out the windows because they're busybodies. And now that you're saying that I have to combat my thinking, I guess they could have said something like, I'm glad she's walking with her kids and her dog and enjoying the day out. I mean, it's kind of like easy now that you put it that way, but in my mind, I kid you not, every time I turned to black, I kept thinking to myself, they're probably looking at me and they're probably judging me.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Gabby. Both your example and Miranda's example so relatable. So many of us in the group have felt that way, especially with that feeling of judgment. That's such a good one because it's like you just feel it. You just feel like people are looking at you, even though you might not always see them or catch them. But when you're walking down your block, you just feel like people are checking through the blinds and the curtains and all that. But I like how you said, hey, they could be looking at me and saying, it's so nice to see her out walking with her kids and her dog or whatever. So that's a nice, more positive way to reframe it, because in reality, they could be saying something actually very positive. They could be inspired by you. I would also like to add that we don't know what people are thinking. So when we have those thoughts that are judgmental, in terms of feeling that other people are judging us, it's good to also remind ourselves we have no proof that they're really thinking that, because we can't read minds. And since we can't read minds, well, would we really want to be able to read everyone's mind? It's kind of an invasion of privacy. And so if it's an invasion of privacy to read their mind in the first place, then why am I reading their mind right now? It's actually none of my business what they're thinking of me. Now that I think about it, I don't care because they don't pay my bills. And so you can kind of retalk yourself out of being concerned about it. Now you can walk down the street with a little more freedom, realizing they can look at me and think whatever they want. I can't read their thoughts, and it doesn't matter ultimately what they're thinking. So really good, Gabby. Appreciate those, you guys. And thanks for being brave enough to share those with us, because so many of us have felt that same way and are feeling the same way. And now we have tools that we can use to re-speak to ourselves. So don't worry, those who are listening to this, don't worry that being self-compassionate is going to make you lazy or self-indulgent or something like that. The reality is that the growing body of research on self-compassion shows that it links self-compassion with being healthy and having good well-being. It's a myth that if I'm self-compassionate, then I'm just going to become lazy or too indulgent, too self-indulgent, or I'm just going to wallow in self-pity, or I'm just going to be letting myself off the hook. and making excuses for my mistakes, or I'm gonna have a lack of self-control or self-restraint. That none of that is actually what the research shows. Self-compassion is about offering yourself the same kind of love, care, and kindness that you would give to someone else. You've heard the adage, treat another person as you would like to be treated. Well, reverse that. Treat yourself the same way you would treat someone else. That's what self-compassion is about. It comes easily for you to care for others. Now you must recognize that you are an other also. You're a human being like they are. You deserve the same amount of compassion, the same amount of love that you're giving everyone else. So many of us received messages through our lives that the way to accomplish our goals was to be judgmental or to criticize ourselves. But we have research from Dr. Neff, who researched this and realized that all that self-criticism just activates the defense, fight, flight, or freeze. And ultimately, you're telling your system you're under attack because you're actually attacking yourself by being negative. So the research brings out that self-compassion puts you in a frame of mind that's actually more motivated to reach your goals. When you create an environment for yourself that's judgment-free, that's reasonable, that says, oh, it's okay that you fell down, just get back up again. We'll try it again. Well, it's okay that I messed up. It's okay that I made a mistake. And that was a bit embarrassing, but happens to everyone. When you're reasonable with yourself like that, you're a smart person. You're smart in your own way. You're a beautiful person. You're beautiful in your own way. You can go take a walk. You can go to work. You can do what you're going to do. People are going to look at you. Some of them could be thinking good things, but really we don't know what people are thinking. When you take care of yourself, when you soothe yourself in that way, it doesn't demotivate you. It motivates you. It allows you to move about, to work and play. Remember, this is how your parents were supposed to parent you. You were supposed to feel free to try things, to explore. But now you are free because they are no longer in authority over you. They no longer have control over you. If you are over 18, you are emancipated. You are an adult. So now you are free to explore and you are free to be compassionate to yourself. So please take this opportunity to make a change. And this change is immediate. It's a decision. And it's a decision to treat yourself the way that you treat others, to love yourself the way that you love your neighbor. And as a result, you will be able to blossom and feel all of the love and the blessings that you're pouring out onto the rest of the world.